I'm going to build an ergonomic classical guitar. My wife was kind enough to allow me to sign up for a guitar building course so I could finally learn how to build guitars. The closest one that I could find is a 4-day course, and it's for classical guitar building. So that's why I'm going to build a classical guitar. So what do I mean by an ergonomic classical guitar? We've seen numerous examples of ergonomic guitar design in electric guitars, such as the Ricktune designed guitars, Abasi guitars, and they all have something in common, and that's kind of that you can have the opportunity to put the guitar's body between your legs, which for Western guitars has kind of gone by the wayside. You do that with classical guitars, but typically you put your right leg there for the Western guitars and play more in a straight position. So instead of an angled position like with the classical guitar. So why did they do that for the classical guitar? Why angle it with your right leg sitting on this corner here instead of giving you kind of... So I created this drawing and I sent it off to the course teacher. He gave me his comments that the bridge is a bit far back. It is a 720 millimeter scale guitar, so it's a quint bass. He made the comments that the body is a bit smaller than normal and the headstock isn't really the normal shape, since usually it kind of goes more outward and has more material at the end, so you can do some figurative work. But in general, it was perfectly possible. And then I came back with a little bit extra. I wasn't sure if I wanted to include an armrest in the first one and, get kicked out of the course before I could even take part. But he has never done one before, but was interested in trying it out. Didn't know how to do it, so we both kind of watched some YouTube videos and came up with some ideas of how maybe we could do it on course day. So with drawing in hand, I headed over to the shop. And the first thing I started doing there was bending the sides and the supports to the shape on the drawing. So what we agreed is that I'm allowed to do this quite custom design, but which is something that's not typically offered in his courses. But I'm gonna have to do a lot of work in advance because he's not gonna do all this custom stuff for me for a standard course. So that included bending the sides, making the form for myself, preparing the armrest block, making the bridge on my own, and yeah, so this is what we're doing right here, is making the armrest block. For anyone who's curious, the backing tracks here are provided by the band Russian Circles. So if you want to check out some more of their music, look down into the description. I've got links to their websites. I brought this block of walnut for the bridge into the guitar builder's shop, and he suggested keeping it square first and using that edge as a guideline to route the channel for the saddle. That's what I'm doing here, and then it will be cut to shape later. His comments earlier about the headstock inspired me to rethink my idea of just having a blank headstock. And instead, I wanted to try something I haven't really done before, which is inlay work. So I chose the red-chested robin, or European robin, which is my daughter's favorite bird. So the materials I'm using to make this are, as you can see here, this orange man-made opal material, which is made here in Germany. And some other materials you see are some black mother of pearl, some abachi wood, some normal mother of pearl, and, as well as another piece of man-made opal from the same manufacturer. For the eyes and the beak on this little guy, I'm planning on using black zirconium. Ta-da! And here it is, finally all the pieces cut out to shape so that they fit together nicely. So as further preparation for the course, I had to do some prep work on the neck. And here I am just preparing the headstock, cutting it to shape roughly. And getting it sanded down nice so that it's nice and square and has the correct shape that I want. The next step was taking it over the drill press and drilling some pilot holes so that I could thread a saw blade through and cut out the holes for the tuning pegs.
Here, using the scroll saw to cut out the holes for the tuning pegs is the last thing that I did before the course started. Here you can see roughly the status I had at the beginning of the course. Oddly enough, I didn't get any footage of me cutting the front or the back to form, but that was the first thing that we did in the course, was take it to the bandsaw and cut out the shape. After that, I spent some time focusing on the peg slots and getting them nicely shaped to form, so that we could then drill the peg holes. He's got a real cool tool here that does all three at the same time on the side. Then I went back out on the scroll saw to cut out the shape of the bridge. I apologize for the weird camera work. The camera was freaking out though because of the scroll saw's movement. It's standing on a stable tripod. I don't know why it was going crazy like that. Here's the first step in the bracing process. First, locating the end of the piece so that you can cut it to length, and then I'll glue it on and form it. Once it's been glued on, I shape it to a nice curve. It's done using a plane and a sanding block. And then we need to cut out some slots for the cross bracing. The instructor is showing me how to properly use a chisel.
Fallen die eigentlich schon? Fallen die eigentlich? Aber dann wird auch den komplett bis auf den ganzen Leim und Dichte rausmachen, dass der Balken wirklich auf dem Holz bleiben wird.
And you can kind of tell here that these bracings have a bit of a curve to them, which translates to the back panel to give it a curve. The instructor gave us a few ideas of how we could shape the heel, and so we each looked at the different options and chose what we wanted to do. I went with a kind of a round shape. So at the end of the first day, I managed to install the bracing on it and shape the neck. And in the morning of the following day, I went straight to cutting slots in the bracing. These smaller ones, which are more in line with the grain, I left a stub at the end so that they would actually provide some support for the sides to be constrained by. And these cross bracings, I only put a slot in there so that they would be braced on both sides. Then I started reducing the mass of the bracing by cutting them to shape here at the ends, tapering them in where they come to the end. And also reducing their mass on the top. Since my bridge design relies on using pins to hold the strings in, if I were to do this with just the spruce top, I run the risk of having the pins, the strings, kind of tear into the grain, because the grain runs the length of the guitar, and so it would just easily pull straight into it. So I'm making these maple supports underneath to kind of hold the strings in and also keep them from tearing out the softwood spruce top. After that, I took the bridge over to the belt sander and started shaping it some. I want to have some huge noticeable chamfers on the bridge, so I'm taking down these corners. And though the neck was a bit prepared for us, there were quite a few details that were left undone and left for us to decide, and including here the headstock. Then it was time for me to finally start working on getting the inlay installed. Since it's a bit difficult to see the pencil lines on the mahogany, I thought it would be a good idea to first cut a template in some basswood. And for that, I just used a very thin faceplate. Originally, I thought maybe I would even use the basswood as a faceplate, but I decided against that. And instead, I just used it as a template. So what I did was I cut the basswood here to shape and size so that the inlay would fit in it perfectly. And then I attached it to the headstock, and I just used it as a flat surface to guide me on what needs to be routed out. After I finished routing everything out, I took a chisel to it and started flattening it so that the base was definitely clean everywhere and at the same depth. And then I also did some of the fine detail work right at the edge there, instead of using the router and possibly going too far and making a mistake, which would be hard to cover up later. Can anybody guess what I'm doing here? I didn't actually plan to install a very delicate piece for the legs. It was difficult to cut any of the material to that skinny thickness. So instead, I thought, why not just use wood filler? So that's why I'm only creating a negative here for the legs. Because I'll go back in later and just fill it in with some wood filler. So then it was finally time to install the inlay. Here I've put a couple spots of super glue in between the pieces to kind of hold them together so that I can manipulate the thing. And yeah, even though I tried my best to get the thing cut exactly the way that the basswood template was, it still, you know, didn't fit absolutely perfectly, so I had to file it a little bit. And then I also added chamfer to the bottom sides so that they could slide in a little bit better. Then I flooded it with some glue and clamped it there and let it dry for half an hour or so. I finally filled in the legs. And once that was done, I glued the neck to the face of the guitar and moved straight on to the last thing that I managed to work on that day. Day number 2 of the course, and that is finally working on the back, getting it ready to meet up with the sides, and also working on the sides and getting them prepared to meet up with the back and front. So here it's just the back that I'm focusing on. Here I'm just getting the curving cleaned up, making a pocket for it to sit on, centered on the brace. So that was the last thing that I managed to do that day, and the first thing I move on to on the third day. But like I'm saying, it's the conclusion of day number 2, and with that, the conclusion of this video. So thanks for watching. Come back for part number 2, which will be the final part, and I will complete the build. And maybe I'll even be able to arrange somebody that can actually play this thing better than I can. So, anyway, you take care, and I'll see you next time.